Hi guys, this is Taylor and today I would like to share with you 10 books that I would like to read by the end of 2018. I love doing this every year. It just gives me kind of a rough guideline as to what types of books and what kind of reading I want to accomplish in a given year. I don't think I've ever read 100% of the books that I assign myself in a year, but it's still good practice. Most of, if not all of these, are just books that have kind of overstayed their welcome on my TBR and that I would just like to have read at this point. And they're almost all either classics or just things that are really at the forefront of like bookish culture right now. So without further ado, let's get started. The first book is the one that I most adamantly want to knock off my TBR, and it's also my biggest literary secret. I have never read To Kill a Mockingbird. I don't even know what To Kill a Mockingbird is about, like, at all. And I'm actually not even sure whether or not I'll actually like it. The one thing that I know about To Kill a Mockingbird is that there is a courtroom scene of some kind and or some type of judiciary element. I typically can't stand books about court trials or that feature court trials. It's like the #1 literary thing that I just do not get along with. And obviously I know this is a very beloved book for a lot of people. For a lot of folks I know it's their favorite book or one of their favorite books. So I'm definitely not going into this expecting to hate it. That one aspect is not enough to deter me. I'm just really curious to see what I finally make of it. Another book that I wanted to read this year, and in fact have already read this year, is Dancing Girls by Margaret Atwood. This is Atwood's first ever published short story collection, and the reason that I really wanted to get to this year was because I believe that this was my longest owned book on my TBR. In the town where I used to live, the public library had this little like secret alcove where they had free books that you could just like snatch willy-nilly. Really young, I was probably in early middle school, and I saw this and I had vaguely heard of Margaret Atwood. Thought it might be something that I might want to read one day. And like I said, I did read this in the beginning of last month. I didn't enjoy it very much at all. You can hear more about that in my January wrap-up. But obviously I'm still really glad to have read this after acquiring it when I was probably 11 or 12. So something I want to get better about this year is starting series. For some reason I have just had it in my head that if a series is completed, I have to read it all in one go, which is obviously just a made-up rule in my brain, but it has also like dissuaded me from starting series because it's in my brain that it's going to be a larger undertaking than it has to be. So in the spirit of throwing that rule out the window, I will hopefully be reading The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. I've never even read a snippet of this series. I've never seen any of the movies. The closest I've come is I've seen that one episode of Flight of the Conchords. So I'm going into this as blindly as a modern person possibly can, and once again I'm just excited to see what I make of it. Another series I want to start that I actually cannot believe I've waited so long to start is the Cormoran Strike series by Robert Galbraith. I think in general I've hesitated to start this series because I'm not a huge mystery fan, which is kind of a dumb reason because obviously lots of different people with completely different reading tastes have totally enjoyed this series. So I figured it was just time to slap this on a TBR and start my enjoyment of this series because I really don't know anybody who hasn't enjoyed this series at least a little bit. On the complete opposite end of the spectrum of reasons that you might want to read a book, I would also like to read Big Sur by Jack Kerouac. This is a completely different pick for me because the last Kerouac I read was On the Road, which I completely and totally hated. It was one of, if not the worst, reading experiences of my life. So the reasoning that goes into me wanting to try another Kerouac is A, I know that his later works, such as this one, are supposed to be completely different from his other ones, and B, if I read this and I hate it, this will officially be my last Kerouac and I will just purge him completely from my mind. And that will free up some space in my brain for like obscure Kurt Vonnegut novels, and then I'll be happy. So, you know, I'm hoping to get something positive out of this, but I'm not holding my breath whatsoever. A book that I am very, maybe increasingly intimidated by is The Country of Ice Cream Star by Sandra Newman. I was sent this as an advanced copy in early 2015, and the reason that I would really like to read this in 2018 is because I have tried and failed to read this on, I think, 3 separate occasions. So this is a dystopian novel where some kind of plague has made the average lifespan less than 20 years, and as a result, the language, including the language in which the book is written, has morphed into like a different dialect of English, as it might if the average age of the population was, you know, like 10 or so. And while I find that concept really cool, it does, at least for me, impact my reading speed, and that, combined with the fact that this is a pretty large book, has meant that I have picked it up and eventually put it down a handful of times. So hopefully this will be the year that I can finally just knock this out, because it's definitely not that I didn't enjoy what I have read of this novel. I just really need to dedicate some time and energy into finishing it. The next 2 books I'm going to group together because I want to read them for more or less the same reason, and they are Lolita and Wuthering Heights. I would like to read these 2 books this year because, once again, kind of just feel like I should have read them by now. Obviously, no reader is under any obligation to read anything in particular, but for me, as someone who likes to explore and be informed about classics, these are 2 gaping holes in my knowledge. Nabokov in particular is an author that I feel like I really might connect with, and Lolita is his most famous and infamous work, so that's where I'm going to be starting. My second to last pick is a little bit different because I have technically read it, and that is Walden by Henry David Thoreau. I say technically because I first read Walden when I was probably 10 or 11, because I was a very pretentious child, and obviously I think that's a little too young to fully grasp some of the higher concepts of transcendentalism. So I really want to read this for the first time as an adult and see what I make of it. It'll be especially interesting because I pretty much ate this with a spoon when I was a kid, and I'm definitely going to approach this with a lot more skepticism as an adult. And my very last pick might seem to come out of left field, especially after all these classics, but it is Beauty Queens by Liva Bray. But I do think that this is kind of almost like a modern YA classic at this point, and I'm just growing more and more curious about it. So this is basically about a plane full of beauty pageant contestants that crash lands on a deserted island, and it pretty much ends up being a retelling of Lord of the Flies. Now, I'm personally not super sold by that synopsis, but I have heard pretty much across the board that this is very well done, very intelligent, and basically a lot more than it would appear on the surface, especially without a dust jacket. And once again, I've just owned this for years, and I feel like it's time to give it a shot. So those are 10 books, maybe technically 9, that I am challenging myself to read by the end of 2018. Maybe this will be the first year that I finish all of them. Very likely it won't, but regardless, let me know what you think of these picks. Happy reading, and I'll see you very soon. Bye!